Good morning. Thanks for joining me. I just wanted to speak, if I could, for a few moments about the decision of the President to deploy roughly 100 United States advisors to Uganda to assist in carrying forward an objective that has been embraced by both branches now for several years of removing from the battlefield Joseph Kony and his leadership. The Lord's Resistance Army, which he has led, has now for more than 20 years destabilized an entire region, caused enormous suffering as they have killed or captured or terrorized literally tens of thousands of helpless civilians. They have focused predominantly on children, and the Lord's Resistance Army has been a genuine scourge to an entire region. Initially focused just in northern Uganda, they in recent years have moved throughout the region in ways that have destabilized and caused real harm to the people of Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and an area that is now the newly independent nation of South Sudan. I was pleased that we were able to have a very constructive briefing for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee earlier today. Portions of it are classified and I won't address in any way. But I think it is important that the Congress and the administration continue a constructive dialogue about the scope, duration, and purposes of this mission. And I will remind you that there was a law enacted by the Congress, it was signed into law last year, about the disarmament of the LRA, that in recognition of the fact that since 2001, the Lord's Resistance Army has been listed as a terrorist organization. Joseph Kony has been specifically identified, and he and several of his leaders are the subject of an international, of an ICC warrant for war crimes. I support and think this modest, reasonable action was an important next step in what has been a multi-year effort, both in partnership with the militaries of states in the region and in partnership with a diplomatic effort by the region. The United States has steadily stepped up its investment and its engagement in support of capable partners. The Ugandans are taking a real strong lead in the field, attempting to deal with what has been a significant challenge now for 20 years. So on a day when there has been a significant development in Libya and where I think another engagement that many of our allies took an active role in, some would say our allies really led in, I think it is a good day to celebrate the fact that we are able to use some of the unique strategic assets of the United States in measured, modest, and responsible ways to advance the protection of civilians and to advance humanitarian goals in partnership with our allies. With that, I'd welcome any questions you might have. Please.
Senator, you talked about the need for a constructive dialogue on scope and duration and the like. What do you say to some, including some of your colleagues who worry that this is an open-ended commitment and that it could escalate?
Well, I'm reassured that the administration intends to continue to consult with members of the leadership in the House and the Senate, that they have a sense of a mission here that in part in direct response to an act of Congress is narrowly tailored towards the removal of Joseph Kony from the battlefield and the removal of his chief lieutenants. There is a sense that today the Lord's Resistance Army is down to a relatively small active fighting force, but because of the remoteness and ruggedness of the terrain in which they operate, because of the real lack of a communications infrastructure, and because of many of the other challenges that the national militaries of the 4 different countries in which they've been operating in combination make this a really difficult mission to undertake. And so I was reassured and am encouraged that there is a clear focus to this mission and an intention to continue a dialogue as this particular deployment unfolds.
Senator Coons?
Please.
What is your reaction to the news of Colonel Qadaffi's death? And more specifically, from here on out, what role should the U.S. play? How much should the U.S. help the Libyan people in this post-Qadaffi era?
Well, I think first it's frankly a good thing for the people of Libya and for the world to no longer have Muammar Qadaffi either in power or continuing to threaten the progress towards democracy in Libya. Our engagement in this campaign, this transition in Libya, in my view, was an appropriately measured one, was done in partnership with a number of our critical allies, and was done at the specific request of the GCC or the Gulf Council states and the Arab League. And I think all of those are important considerations at a time when the United States is significantly engaged in Afghanistan and Iraq, when fiscal constraints here at home make, I think, many Americans concerned about whether we can and should continue to attempt to be the world's policeman. I think our engagement in Libya, which takes a different turn today, can and should remain one that is scaled appropriate to the needs of the Libyan people to now quickly transition to a stable democracy, to rejoining sort of the community of nations, and to dealing with some of the humanitarian, civilian infrastructure needs that they face immediately right in front of us. It is my hope that this will be a real opportunity for one of the major nations in North Africa to make a peaceful, responsible transition to a multi-party democracy and to being a vibrant economy. How things move forward in Libya will send critical signals to the rest of the region and to the world. So I do think the United States has a real and strong interest in continuing to be engaged. Please.
Senator, on that subject, Senator McCain was on CNN a few minutes ago and seemed to give only sort of tepid praise to the administration for its role in the Libya mission and gave more praise to the British and the French. And he explained that he thought that the U.S. should have done more earlier to put Qadaffi down and fly zone, et cetera. It would not have gone as far as it did, this engagement. Could you address that? Do you think that concern from McCain is valid or not?
Well, I didn't see Senator McCain's comments, and I could simply speak for myself. I thought that we faced a very difficult decision as conditions on the ground in Libya unfolded really very quickly. And I supported the administration's decision to join an effort by several of our longest-standing, most vital allies, where they were willing to take the lead in terms of the military assets committed and a lot of the operational cost. And I think it was really on the verge of an obvious, imminent disaster, humanitarian disaster, as Gaddafi's forces were almost literally at the gates of Benghazi, that a decision was made to act. Might we have achieved a different outcome had we acted earlier? I'm really not going to pontificate on something that I don't have better insight into than perhaps more senior or more experienced members of this body do. But I'll say this: I supported the administration's action. I'm glad we've had some regular consultation and dialogue about this deployment in Uganda, because I think it's important in an unstable region and world for the branches between the administration and Congress to be in regular constructive dialogue about where we are making decisions to deploy American forces and where we are making decisions to engage American assets.
Senator Coons,
Please.
Are you aware of the President consulting with Congress before sending troops to Central Africa?
There was notice given to staff and to members that I think was timely and constructive. One could debate whether the War Powers Resolution or the congressional act that preceded this deployment was the more critical, but rather than getting into the legal details, I think what's important is that we did receive a War Powers Resolution notification from the President, and we've had an opportunity earlier today for a very constructive briefing, and I believe we will continue to have a constructive dialogue about the scope and duration of this mission as facts on the ground unfold.
Senator, now that
Please.
you've been briefed on the scope of the mission, do you have any concerns that 100 U.S. troops won't be enough to get the job done? And
Well,
we have to send more down the road?
to be clear, the United States troops that have been sent into the region are not themselves to be engaged in combat, except in defense, and the majority of them are there to do the sort of train and equip activities that we've done in many nations across many engagements across many years. Because of how rugged this terrain is, because of how light and technically unsophisticated and mobile the Lord's Resistance Army is, and because of their demonstrated inclination to move swiftly and across national borders, I think it is appropriate for us to be deploying troops that will help each of the respective national armies in their stated intent to take on the Lord's Resistance Army and to be more effectively engaged in the field in their nations and in the region. This is a task or a challenge that several countries across the region have asked for our help with and have been engaged in themselves over many years. So am I concerned about the potential over the longer term for some demands on the United States in this field growing. Of course, I'm concerned about that, but I think so is the administration. And I think this step is the next in a series of measured actions, both military and diplomatic, to continue to ratchet up pressure on the LRA until we succeed in the stated objective that Congress enacted into law last year of removing Joseph Kony and his chief leaders. Please.
On Libya, has there been any discussion of what role, if any, the U.S. will play going forward? And then also, is there going to be any effort to accelerate the providing of funds to the Transitional National Council?
Not that I've been personally engaged in. I would expect with this development today, we will turn more actively to a conversation about the transition going forward, because until there was real security across the country, a resolution of the status of Qadaffi and his supporters, I don't think we could turn either the focus of Libyans or the focus of the multinational force that's engaged predominantly to recovery, redevelopment, and so forth. So I would expect that'll happen today, but I haven't been directly engaged in those conversations at all. Please.
Senator, now that Qadaffi's gone, would you like to see the NATO mission there wind down and the U.S. mission wind down and be replaced with, let's say, foreign aid to Libya?
Well, I think as swiftly as is responsible, we should transition to a partnership with the people of Libya that is focused on stabilizing their security situation, enabling them to transition quickly to a transparent, democratic, modern, and open political structure, and to allowing them to develop in ways that will initially deal with the significant problems for their infrastructure that this conflict has created, and then hopefully lay the groundwork toward their fully rejoining the community of nations. Qaddafi's been a very, very difficult player for a very long time, and the people of Libya really haven't been able to fully participate in the world for a long time. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of transition and changes to be done. But it would be my hope that we would be able to transition out of a NATO predominantly military mission as quickly as is possible.
And would you support foreign aid to Libya?
I'd have to look at the terms and conditions and purposes. In my view, there ought to be a multinational effort to ensure stability, transition to democracy, and the opportunity for the Libyan people to access their abundant natural resources and to participate fully in the future of Libya. Any other questions? Great. Thank you all very much.